Guys, we are back. Episode 3, Unorthodox Perspectives. Really looking forward to today's show. Leroy, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Welcome back to everyone, and welcome to our show once again. Excited, excited.
Yeah, man. How's your week been? Have you been enjoying the warm weather and everything?
Yeah, my week has been alright. The weather's been quite hot where I am. I live in Derby.
Mm.
So yeah, man, it's been quite nice. In terms of the weather, but I've been working a lot. So today was actually a day that I had free. So just trying to take it easy.
Yeah, I feel you,
Yeah.
man. And really love the topic that we're going to be discussing today. Do you want to introduce it? Obviously, we had that conversation on
Yeah.
on WhatsApp in the week, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this. But anyway, guys, so it's all about expectations. I'm going to let Leroy
Hmm.
share more about it, and then we'll dive straight into it.
Yeah, this week we're going to be talking about expectations versus intentions. Now, the two, I guess it's something that we all face. As we all face expectations of other people, as well as versus our own intentions of what we want to do, of our life. So that's the topic of today. Just let's try and dive into that and try to see the dynamics of actually how do these two aspects really work together. How do you work? How do you fulfill other people's expectations, or those expectations that you feel like you need to fulfill to make other people happy, and and how do you then also fulfill your own intentions of how you want to interact with that person, or how you want certain outcomes to be. Okay, for example, I'll take something for example as simple as going out. Let's say you've got a group of friends and it's a Friday, and we want to go out. So we come over to yours and basically give you the idea of the night, and then maybe you had a totally different complete idea of what you intended to do with your night, right? But because of our expectations of having your presence on our night, thinking it's going to be more fun if you join us, then gives you that conundrum where you are now having to choose between your own intention and your own and the expectations of those around you, or those that care for you. So how do you deal with that? And it's as easy as it may be to just say, oh no, I don't want to go. We also know that in reality, sometimes we can get persuaded to end up doing things that we may not generally be up for, but we are swayed into and then end up doing something. So that may not necessarily be our intentions, but then we have fulfilled an expectation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. As when we were discussing this topic, or thinking of a topic to discuss. Sorry,
Hmm.
I was I was thinking about like my own experiences with this,
Okay.
and in terms of expectations, I'll focus there first. I definitely have experiences with this, and I'm sure, like as we all do. And so for me, when I was obviously younger, I had, in a way, like looking back, like that unconscious kind of like expectations of others that were totally driven by my value system. But at the time, I didn't realize it because I had no idea about life values. So, an example that I would give is when I was trying to keep in touch with people and they, for whatever reason, wouldn't reply or something. And then I thought, like, well, you're meant to be my best friend or my friends or like whatever it is. Like, why aren't you getting back to me? And then that caused, dynamics within like those relationships, right? So that's an expectation that I had of them. And so, but it was completely driven by my value system in terms of, one of my values, just say, is like respect or something. And so if that's then shown through like keeping in touch with me, or like just like one of these sorts of things, and so it also then comes into belief systems as well. And then like when that doesn't happen, then I would then it just sets up like that a different dynamic within the relationship, if that makes sense. So I actually think some of our expectations of others are driven by our value system and our belief system. And once I realized this, and actually also realized that we all have different belief systems and different value systems, and so why am I expecting other people, in this case, let's just say, to reply or do this or do that, when I'm basing that on my own value systems of what I would do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you.
So it's a little bit, I suppose it's a little bit with intentions, maybe, like, because then that would be like my intention as well. Maybe like if it was the other way around, then that's something that I would do as well, because I'm living from my value system and my belief system, right? And so I always refer to this book, Tony Robbins' book, Waking the Giant Within, where I've kind of like started to discover all of this. But again, like when we were discussing the topic and what to talk about, I was thinking like my own experiences, and this is one that kind of came up. And I think, again, most of the expectations that we have on others are drawn from our own belief systems and value systems, but we have to realize that there are systems in terms of like how we navigate through life, not somebody else's.
That's true, man. It's true. You actually just reminded me of there's a book I've been reading about growth mindset and fixed mindset. If I can find it, hold on. I'll try and find it before the end of today. But they were mentioning on one section that like what you just mentioned on your example in terms of your own values. So your expectations you're projecting on other people were based on your own values that you would also uphold if you were in their shoes. Am I right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, what this book was saying was that, like, in terms of, it also links with your mindset, I guess, like what you said, like your belief system, your values, it's your mindset. And it was saying that for people with a fixed mindset, when we are in a fixed mindset, you have come to understand that there's certain qualities of yourself that you may not be able to grow any further. There's certain things that you are good at, and there's certain things that you're not good at. And in that mindset now, when you are interacting with other people, because of that fixed mindset of things that you are really good at, and the things that you're not good at, when you're with somebody, you will more likely expect them to now worship your good qualities in order for your own sense of worth for you to feel like you're valuable. Do you know what I mean? If you're making sense, because you have a fixed amount of things that you're good at. So the person you're with, you would rather have them praise those things that you're really good at. And if they ever sort of talk down to you or just make you feel bad about yourself, you really feel it, because now they are not doing something that is just giving you that sense of worth. And they mentioned that it's like you're almost asking that person to have a one-person religion of praising you, because now you are their everything. That's from a fixed point of perspective. So your expectations of people are based on that sense that, okay, if I can do something, like you were saying, in your situation, if you could do it when you are in their shoes, then why is it that the other person is not able to do so? Do you know what I mean? Because now in a different mindset now, as a growth sort of mindset, it's in a sense that nothing can complete you, because you're always working in a process. So it's not necessarily somebody's actions or things that they can do that will ever get you to a point where you feel like, yes, you are truly who you are, or you feel that, yes, they are praising you, and you feel that, yes, this is what I need, because you know that you are constantly growing yourself. So from the example you gave, it's a very it's a complicated way of how we deal with it, because we have our mindset, our belief system, that value system you're talking about, and then you also have your own intentions that you want to impose on others, and the expectations that people have it sort of throws you off on what you want to intend of for your life, if that makes sense. Because I'll take your example. You were intending to impose that if you text somebody, you'd rather have them text you back straight away, right? If that doesn't happen, your expectation hasn't been fulfilled. Your intention has also not been fulfilled. So you have projected your own intention on somebody to basically um, reaffirm what you believe should be done, or in a way of interacting with somebody. You know, does
Yeah.
that even make sense? What I'm
No,
saying,
it
man?
does. It does. 100%. I'm just like here, kind of like thinking about it, or and yeah, and just wrote a few things down to mention here. I think one thing, especially when it comes to obviously with other people, and that is communication. I think communication, like through this process, is key, because we do all have different value systems, belief systems, etc. And so, I think we have to be able to communicate effectively as well, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
But also, so since growing, obviously, like say, like developing that more growth mindset and growing and trying to move forward, I've then came across like this principle that I've tried to then now live by is expect nothing, appreciate everything. And it doesn't mean like I always like live by it, because sometimes I do expect things, and that I think it's a bit of like human nature in that. But I always try and go back to it, because the expectations that other people have on you are always going to change. So you can't control other people's expectations of you. Like, people are always going to have expectations of you. Like, you can't do nothing to control that. All you can control and focus on is your own intentions. And so I think the actual conversation is to focus more on people having that. I think it's like a self-worth thing a bit as well, of knowing their own intentions, their intentions being good intentions, and then them carrying that out, and also having the communication alongside that to communicate with other people if they don't happen to meet somebody else's expectations. But don't feel bad, or don't, worry about meeting somebody else's expectations, because they're always going to change. Like, you could one day meet somebody's expectations, and then the next day that person's expectations of you change, and so if kind of we're playing that game, like, we're always trying to catch up to other people's expectations of us. And so I think what 2020 has kind of realized for me, and kind of growth this year, is to do more of that inner work. I think we touched on it a bit last week, when we were talking about young people and that, but I think it's doing that inner work ultimately. And so I think when you live for pleasing other people or meeting somebody else's expectations, then again, you're living life from like externally in and not from internally out. And so I kind of want to help people to get into that more of that mindset. And so that would be some of my like building on this, like some of my thoughts even on that, is to focus on your own intentions, them being good intentions, and not worrying or and that about other people's expectations of you, because they're always going, like, they're going to change, and you have no control about that. Like, I don't want to waste my energy on things I can't control.
I get you. Yeah, it makes sense. So would you say then that you can't find a balance then? Is there a balance between the two, between the expectations of others and your good intentions? Can you find a balance?
So I think human nature, and this is the whole part of like the growth journey, and just like you're saying, like developing that growth mindset and always trying to move forward. Like, we're always, I think, at times going to go back into that mindset of trying to please other people, or even if like, so even if in like a couple of areas of our lives, we have more of a growth mindset. In the other areas, we may fall back into these patterns of thinking in that. And so I think it's just that ultimate growth journey of just trying to grow and move forward. And so sometimes, so what I'm saying is, sometimes you may not care about other people's expectations. I also think it's like who. as well. Like if it's your parents, like you want to keep your parents happy, like obviously their parents, you brought, you know, if you have a good relationship with them, they brought you into the world, etc. If it's like your old best friend or John down the street who's a neighbor, like who cares? You know, like really who cares? But I think it was also a conversation around who is also then the closest to you, because I think the more people mean to us, the more we're also going to try to meet their expectations of us, because we think that that's like they're going to love us more, or you know, like that's what our relationship is built on. When our relationship should be built on other different values and principles, etc., not always meeting their expectations of us still, and just focuses on being, again, your own intentions and being a good human being ultimately. So I think it's also that dynamic as well. I don't know like your thoughts on that, but I do think, thinking about this more, it then depends like who, because obviously our parents mean more to us than John down the street would, who's just a neighbor who we see when we walk the dog once a week. You know, like everyone's going to sometimes like think things about us and have expectations of us, and you know, and so I think it's also to really reflect on that for people, because you know, the more people mean to us, I think then it becomes a little bit more challenging
to separate between your expectation and their your intention and their expectations.
yeah because they mean a lot to us, and so we want to, again, like the example I gave, you know, the group of people I was hanging around at the time, like they were some of my best mates, right? And so I obviously wanted to keep in touch with them. I obviously wanted to you know, so like they meant a lot to me, you know, because we were best mates, like grew up together, etc., etc. So compare that to somebody who maybe I hang out with a few times at school, like back in the day, like it wouldn't be the same, because they are not necessarily like my best friends, or they don't necessarily mean a lot to me, if that makes sense. So when like people mean a lot more to you and they have expectations of you, you're more likely to want to kind of upheld to those expectations, because they mean a lot to you ultimately, you know. Where I think if people don't mean a lot to you, like I just think like for me, like I just didn't really care. Even like through that, even the people that did mean a lot is still working on that, because even the expectations they had of me and I had on them, like that's not how a relationship should be kind of built, right? Again, it should be built on other different values and principles, not me, you know, not anyone like thinking, oh, you know, Luke's got these expectations of me, I need to meet them. Like that's not how a relationship should be or anything. So I think people, again, like do that inner work to set their own intentions, and in a way forget about other people's expectations, because they're always going to change. That would be like my underlying thoughts. But also have, again, I come back to it, also have the like communicate with them, because if they are your brother or your mom or your dad or like whoever it is, again, I think you need to have a conversation with them, like this is my intentions, and like I just think also through that dialogue, then a lot of kind of conflict and that would be resolved. Again, like final thing, and then I'll hand back over to you.
All right, man. It's all right.
I do think there also gets to a point where there's like enough kind of talking, I suppose, if that makes sense. So, for example, with the friendship group that I mentioned, like I then started to communicate more of like my values, etc., and like how, and even with the expectation that I had, it in a way it was an insecurity as well, but started to communicate more of that from like where I was coming from and that, but then things still didn't change, you know. And so I think even through that dialogue of like my intentions and somebody else's expectations, I think then there, through that communication, becomes like a balancing act. No, like not balancing act, but like people meet in the middle, like a middle ground type of thing.
Yeah.
So then you can all like ultimately move forward together. I think if that doesn't happen, then you have to take it upon yourself to like move in a different direction and just totally know like these are my intentions. I'm just kind of going. I've tried to communicate. So again, I'm just kind of talking here, like talking my thoughts out loud. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think the key points I want to get across is, one, the communication aspect, because in all relationships that's so important. Two is to focus on more of the inner work, and your own intentions. And if your intentions are good, then move forward with them. And then three is with other people's expectations. It depends on varying levels of who those people are. And if they're people closest to us, definitely dive into more and more and more communication, because I think that's how then we can all move forward together.
Nah, I hear that, man. I just had just a thought that just came in from the levels of expectations based on the relation that somebody has of you. Wouldn't that then put somebody in a position of power to manipulate you into doing what they want based on the fact that they know that you regard their expectations very highly?
Powerful question. I think in all I think in most. So if we look at like relationship dynamics, I think there's power in different types of relationships, right? So parents to a child, obviously the parents quite obviously has more power over the child, and rightly so. Like that's how they keep them safe and everything. So I think if we go kind of more down that route, then I think in most relationships, like there's probably power dynamics over things. So I don't know if that answered your question, but just kind of like on that. So I do that with a relationship to answer your question, or to answer that. Yeah.
No, you're right. No, I get you. I do. I think, like, from what you were saying, one thing I got was that, like you said, like there is also power dynamics depending on the relation that you have, and then there's also those levels of different expectations, be differing from somebody who's close to you to somebody who's a total stranger. You will regard their expectations differently, and my take on that balancing question I posed was that the balance really, it's almost as if you are having to now take all these different levels of expectations and account for them when you are now sort of thinking about your own good intention that you want to do. Or do you first come up with your good intention and then share it, and just like you said, communicate and creating that dialogue? I think what I got from that communication side of it is that it's like communication is like the Wi-Fi between the two of us. I cannot know what you are intending to do, Luke, where you are, unless we communicate. And I cannot then say, okay, I'll just wait, and hopefully you would have done what I'm expecting you to do without me giving any instruction of anything that I may expect of you, and the intention of that. Because I think it all goes down, it comes down, like you said, it's inner work and self-awareness and being able to realize your own sense of worth. It's very hard, I feel like, to balance between the two, because like you said, the dynamics of the relationship plus the level of regard in terms of that person's relationship to you, it makes it difficult when you are looking at those people's expectations and their positions in your life against what you feel deep down like you want to just express yourself by, or just and intentionally move, not to harm anyone, but just something for yourself, something to just make you feel like, yeah, you are in control. Because I feel like sometimes when we are living so much for expectations, we end up being just taken around, like, from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and we're hardly doing anything of our own for our own lives, but we're just sort of like in and out in somebody else's life to fulfill their expectation, to basically ensure that their world, their interpretation of the world, their interpretation of the relationship they have with you, with people, is enforced. And what happens is, when we create that dialogue, when you communicate with that person our true intentions, before they can impose whatever they're expecting on us, it causes them to also be aware of your own presence as a person with thoughts, feelings, ways that you may want to go about things. It gives them the opportunity of looking at you not as just a tool in their life to enable their own life to be fulfilling, but to be somebody to actually share this experience of growing and walking in life together, and showing each other like a different parts of the world in terms of how you perceive something. When I share with you, you are seeing that world through my eyes, if that makes sense. So in through my intention, you are able to realize more than if I am just succumbing to every single expectation that you have. I'm rarely ever giving you my perspective to life, my intention of what I would like to do with life. So that inner work, I guess, is what gives that balance with the expectations of people based on whatever relationship they have with you, or their dynamic, the power dynamics. Because the inner works helps you identify your own good intentions, your own belief values, your what you feel like is not going to harm anyone, but it's generally just going to make you feel good, and hopefully you're not stepping on anybody's toes. That inner work helps you gain a bit of resolve against those people that may try and guilt trip you based on their power in your relationship with them. They may try and use that power card to say their expectations should be fulfilled because of the power or the relationship you have, of which I feel like that's when we are starting to manipulate one another based on the expectations that I might have over somebody, or I may think that somebody should do certain things in order for my fulfillment to happen, of which is unfair, because now you're almost trying to ask that person to live your life in the way that you see it best, you know.
Mm.
And
I think, yeah. Sorry, go on.
yeah, go on. I was just gonna
No,
say
I'm
something.
sorry. I also think like there's different forms of expectations. So what I mean by that is, so somebody's parents. So if I'm a 18-year-old or something, my parents could expect me to go to university because that's based on their value system, their belief system, like we're talking about. I also think there's also people's expectations of us based on what we're then communicating with them, and kind of what we're saying and how we're showing up in the world. So again, what I mean by that, if I say, especially in like a business relationship, like taking ours with this, if I say, Leroy, I'm going to set up the live stream. It's a very small example. I'm going to set up the live stream for Unorthodox Perspectives, and then I don't do it, but you expected me to do it because I communicated to you to say that I would. And so now you have that expectation of,
Yeah.
okay, so Luke's doing that. My intention could then still be to do that, but something else come up that grabbed my attention. But again, so then I still need to communicate that to you, that my intention was to do that, Leroy. Very sorry, something else came up. I'll set it up now, type of thing. And so it's a small kind of example, but it's an example that people can blow up and kind of see in their own lives different forms in that. So I think on the expectation point of view, there's like those different types, like from people's belief systems and value systems, and that, like with me with the people you hang around, but also if it's like parents with their children, or like whatever it is. And then I think you have those expectations that people have because we've communicated, or we said we would do something, or we've shown up in the world in a certain way, and then people have their expectations because we've communicated it ultimately.
Yeah. No, definitely. Like we tend to sometimes. I've found myself in this situation so many times. Like, you say you can do one thing, and obviously that automatically sets up an expectation to somebody, and then you don't necessarily do it in that time, and your intentions may be otherwise, but because you haven't communicated through the change of that expectation, or it's you don't know how somebody's set up. Maybe somebody is not so laid back. Maybe somebody is just
Mm.
they really want that thing as when they were told. So that small adjustment can go a long way to avoid maybe a conflict, avoid a clash, because you're not lying. That's something I've realized. Like I've, is that sometimes we'll be on the call to somebody that you're meeting, and you say, I'll be there in 5 minutes. You clearly know the GPS is telling you 25 minutes, you know? And it's like, I don't know, there's just that something of not wanting to disappoint that then leads us to actually disappointing,
Mm. I think it's
you know?
insecurities that we have.
Say that again.
I think it's insecurities that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, you can go on, man.
No,
Do you wanna?
well, so I'm just thinking, like, even when I used the example I gave beforehand, like old social group, etc., and just because like we were quite close and everything, I had that expectation, like if I get in touch, like reply, have conversations. What like for me, I had that expectation. It's like what people do. And then when it didn't happen, it like brought out that it just even with that, like it just brought out that insecurity in myself. And so I think again, I think it's linked to probably the belief system, the value system. But yeah, I think insecurities come into it as well.
Definitely. I think that those are the certain things that we hardly ever think about. We are unaware of. We don't want to really like dive into because it's just nobody really wants to face what they know, like deep down. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want to face certain things, so we'd rather just push them aside and just have them not in our mind. But what we don't realize is that these things that we don't confront, they are also still working within us subconsciously. There's this book called Think Fast and Slow. It talks about the different two systems that we operate under as our human brain works. And the system one is the one that we use for the just quick thinking.
Yeah.
Basically, we are not doing any like hard work with your brain. These are just it's just easy. That's when you are working on an automated sort of frequency. And then system two, it's when if I was to ask you 199 times 500, you know, something like that. Now you're having to work out that you crazy,
Very hard. I'm crap at
you
maths.
know that. You know what I mean? You're having to bring up a pad and actually write up. But if I was to ask you what is 1 plus 1, do you know what I mean? That you can say that even if you are falling asleep, you know. So the two systems, they operate in a way that subconsciously we have that system too. We hardly ever bring it to the forefront because it's the heart. It's like it's the CPU, it's what keeps the computer running. Like, it brings up that information up quickly for system one to just, take and whatever not. But as soon as we try and put system two into work, it just becomes long, man. Like, nah, man, this is long. Why do you want me to read this? We talk about, reading is something that can change your life, but we don't want to do that because it's hard work. Do you know what I mean? But it's those hard things that we avoid that actually lead us to certain things that we may not easily just find.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah.
makes sense. You know.
100%. I think we put off the things that do bring up put off the things that are hard work, that do bring up insecurities in ourselves.
Mm.
And just things that are like uncomfortable and everything. But it's all of those that help us to grow the most. So it's about facing them, and sometimes it's having those conversations with people around kind of, well, this is an expectation you have of me, like why, like this is my intention, and kind of working it out. Even so, I just wrote down, I think there's actually another type of expectations as well. Obviously I shared the two before, like from values, belief systems, and then from like how we communicate and show up in the world. I think we all have like expectations of ourselves as well. Like we have our intentions, like so I intend to do this, but then we also have an expectation of ourselves as well. And I think what happens with ourselves is that while we may have an intention and an expectation at the same time, if we don't meet the expectation, then we judge ourselves and beat ourselves up and everything. And so I think that's another thing for people to work on. Now, I've had a few kind of discussions around this with people, especially when I shared like the value and the principle of expect nothing, appreciate everything. It's not like with goals and dreams and everything to dream big and to have and develop that vision in terms of like, I don't expect to make £1 million or kind of these sorts of things, right? But I think that's more confidence in yourself and in your ability to make that happen. I don't think like that's an expectation, because anything could happen that could get in your way to stop you from doing that. As long as you have the confidence and the belief that you can, I think it's different than from having an expectation. Because I think what tends to happen is people, in those expectations of themselves, I expect to be a billionaire by the time I'm 24, and then it doesn't happen because like how many million 24-year-olds do you know? Like if you think about the most successful people and that, like they're actually like mid 40s, like 50s, like obviously there's some exceptions and that, but most like they're mostly kind of that age range, and so I think then people set the unrealistic expectations of themselves. And so again, like I don't want people to confuse this with not having a vision and not setting goals and not dreaming big and everything. But I think that's also another set of expectations that people have for them to work on, the expectations that they have of themselves, which then plays into every other expectation that people have of them. It's a full circle,
Yeah, I get you, man. It's true. Like our intentions, our expectations, are what we judge how well we have sort of completed our intentions in a way, if you think, because you will intend to do something, and through that expectation of knowing that you can capably make $1 million in a year or whatever, you now have an expectation based on your intention, right? And how well you go about fulfilling your intention will basically give you a result on how close you were to fulfilling your expectations, your own personal expectations, that's you deal with yourself. And I think it leads me to the third part when I was saying that I was gonna ask whether is it one or the other more important? Is people's expectations more important, that we should actually just ensure that we uphold them, or is our own intentions more important?
Intentions. For me, intentions. Because if other people's expectations of us are always changing, how again, like we get into that cycle of always playing catch up. So then if we're all playing catch up to other people, we're not doing that inner work. And we're living life from other people, like outside sources in it. And so for me, that never brings fulfillment, that never brings happiness, that never brings joy or any of that, because all of those emotions have to be felt in and like projected out into the world ultimately, you know. And so I'm really on like this master your inner game type of thing, you know, master your inner game type of thing, because then I think you'll attract more people to you that are more willing to, you know, when intentions and expectations don't necessarily meet, to have those conversations, to communicate, to fix it, because they're also growing themselves. And so, I just keep coming back to the answer of it's got to be an inside out job, and your intentions are an inside thing, you know. Now your own expectations are as well, I suppose, like building on it. But I think our own expectations as well. Again, it is an inside thing. Then it's setting like more. I don't even like the word to use the word realistic expectations. I think it's more practical expectations. And what I mean by that is, I had this example the other week, and I'm trying to remember it. So people like, you know, set realistic goals, but anything can be achievable. And so like, then the question becomes, is it practical? Like in the moment, like, can I make, you know, $1 million or £1 million or like whatever it is? Yes. So that's not realistic because other people have done it. Like I can do that. The question then becomes like, in what time frame is that the most practical? Is it the most practical in a month? You know, like, no. Is it the most practical within a year? Probably not, especially like if people are just getting started in their entrepreneurial journey or not. Like it's going to be pretty hard. Start at 0 to 1 million in a year. Doable. Then the question becomes, are things practical? Not necessarily are things realistic. So I think then with people's own expectations is to set more practical expectations for themselves that then feed into their intentions. So then they can go out and take action on them instead of setting unrealistic expectations ultimately.
I like how you mentioned that realistic and unrealistic. I mean practical and realistic expectations, because it just brought me back to that example we're giving on how when you are late or to somebody who may be expecting you at a certain time, that time becomes not, as soon as you cannot meet that time, it becomes unrealistic, right? So you could not, however much you drive, you cannot cover that 25-minute distance in 5 minutes. No matter if you told that person you'll be there in 5 minutes, it's just like what you're saying. You cannot. There is certain work that you have to do within yourself in order to get to that point to make that million, I guess. Do you know what I mean? You cannot wake up today and say, I'm going to be a million in a week, and you have never even read anything to do about entrepreneurial thing, right? But you can practically come up with a plan as you are growing to see how, like it also goes back to what you said about self-awareness, about knowing your skill, knowing what you're good at, knowing what, you know, where you need to better yourself, because we are not all like, you know, you come to a certain level and that's it. You can't learn anymore. You can't do anything anymore. You can always learn something new. You can always grow some part of your old skills. You can always develop new skills. So through that knowledge of self, understanding of what we can capably do is the same. If I was to take that example, is that you know you can capably get there in 25 minutes. There's no reason for me to lie to you, Luke, and say, okay, Luke, I'll be there in 5 minutes. You are waiting for another 25 minutes in frustration. Your mind is going berserk. Like you just, you know, you don't even know what to expect, right? And half the time we end up not wanting to pick up that call if you are not calling me to find out where I am, right?
Yeah.
You know, it becomes I don't know. It's like I'm working on my own thought of thinking, okay, I've told them I'll be there in 5 minutes, but I'm not there. So I'm not going to answer your call until I just show up. But when I show up, practically it wasn't feasible. It maybe you could have used that 25 minutes to do something with your life. Do you get what I mean? Like
But then, yeah, but even with that, I think that's where the principle comes in with like expect nothing, appreciate everything, you know, and what I mean by that, like even if people now say to me like, Luke, I'll do this or Luke, I'll do that, I then don't go into this mindset or this place of then just because they said they would do something, that I have that expectation that they're actually going to carry through and do it, because life gets in the way, life gets busy, etc., etc., etc. But some people would like take what people say at face value and like, okay, so they're going to do this, and almost expect them to do it, and then when they don't, have all these negative emotions or get be pissed off or angry or everything. And it's, you know, totally acceptable. Like I used to be in that place, but I've kind of gone through also a lot of like disappointment with having those expectations of others and them not, I suppose, living up to it, to actually realize like I'm going to try not to expect anything. And even if people say something and they then do it, like I'm just going to be in this place, this mindset of appreciation and gratitude, and like live in this place. You know, I think it takes a personal development to get there and personal growth to get there, and doing that inner work to get there. But I understand what you mean, because then like using that example, like actually 25 minutes, I could have done something else. But you know, I still do that. You know, like if I have a call, for example, I don't know, at like 7 or something, like I don't always expect the guests will show up, and if or you know the people will show up, and if they don't, there's been times before I then have like a backup plan or something, like okay, if they don't show up, I'm going to work on this, or I'm going to work on this. And so I think like for that is a deeper conversation around like planning, taking more responsibility, accountability, etc., like having a plan, etc. But again, I think like that's where that principle comes into play of like expect nothing, appreciate everything. Even if people communicate to you they're going to do something and set that expectation up, I still kind of want people to get into that place of, but just because like life happens, just because things happen, so you know that's no excuse. It's just the more practical kind of answer to things. You know, it's just like the more, you know, like we've all experienced it. You know, it's just, for me, it's just a fact. And so if we can just get into that place of like gratitude and appreciation, like even if people communicate to us of, okay, they followed through on their word, etc., I think life in itself becomes just a whole lot better, because when people then don't follow through on that, you're not you know, getting pissed off or getting angry or experiencing like these more negative emotions and taking that joy away from your life. Ultimately, you're just kind of more acceptive of the situation and just kind of carry on with it, because you know these things in life happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, definitely. So I think what I'm getting from what you just said there, it's the expectations of others when we lead our lives from an externally influenced perspective. You know, actions. I mean, it's like your actions are externally influenced. You know, and intentions, that internally inspired actions. You know, because like what you said there, like I said, between the two, which one is the more important, you say? And you was like, you think intentions are more important, because at the end of the day, that is also about your inner work, about, it's a definition of self, you know, to self, you
One
know,
other thing
and
on that, yeah, one other thing on that, Leroy, is, but it's also like from that. I'm not a control freak. I'm really not. But it's just also like you have control over your own intentions. You know, like I have no control. Like so, if you had expectations of me, I can't control those expectations. You know, if anyone has expectations of me, like I can't control that. I can't control other people, so I can't control their expectations. I can't control their thoughts. I can't control any of that. All I can control is myself, like my actions, you know, setting my own intentions and everything. And so I just want people to focus there ultimately, because then they have the power ultimately to change that and just have more control over that. So again, I'm sorry for butting in. I just
No,
wanted to
no, it's all right, man. No, no. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always said discipline is the first step to control, you know? You know what I mean? And if you think to yourself, like in us,
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, guys. Have we lost Leroy? Let me. Bear with me, guys. I'll bring him back. Yeah, okay. We've lost Leroy. Give me a minute, guys. You back, Leroy?
yes, I'm back.
Awesome. Carry on, man.
I've just been using my data, so I forgot to press the Wi-Fi button. So I've run out of data, man.
Oh man.
But it's all good, man. It's all good. So as I was saying, like, you know, our discipline in it's tied into a lot of things we do, I guess. And when it comes down to our own self, it's like, how disciplined are you to listen to yourself? You know, because expectations from outside, the external influences we get from other people, they're much more easy to follow because we can see them, we can hear them, you know, and we can see their reactions, you know, and we hardly ever take into account, like what you're saying, you cannot control the expectations of people, the people's expectations of you. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes people know, they may understand, or they may act in a certain way, you know, to try and get you to act on their expectations. And it's like, if we don't have an internal discipline, if we don't have an internal, like, you know, buffer against those influences that can lead us to sort of like say, okay, clearly this person is sad, clearly this person is not happy with me right now, what can I do to get them back into a happy state? Having that mindset, dealing with somebody, you are in a very manipulated position, because now you're working to better their lives by your own actions. And like you said, we will always be behind. We will always be behind them because they ultimately know exactly what they're expecting of you, and you are just catching up, you know. So it's your intentions are very powerful, and when you understand where they're coming from, not to harm anyone, not to, you know, put anyone down or anything like that, but when you really understand, like, your own place in this world, in terms of you, there's no reason for us to feel like you don't belong where you are, or because somebody's expectations are not fulfilled, so you feel like you're not worthy enough. You know, it's like what Luke is saying. We have to have that inner work done first. That inner work is it's what's gonna protect you from the external influences that may try and put you down, try and put you off course on what you truly want to do. You know, it's very hard for you to listen to the whole world and also follow your own path. You know, it's very hard. You know, but if you listen to yourself and acknowledge and accept your own way, when you are not walking in that way, it's very hard for somebody to lead you astray, you know, because you already know where you are going from, where you are coming from. Whereas when it's the other opposite one, you know, you're just going and you're being taken from left, right, and center. So intentions are very important. Things we need to understand where we are coming from before we can even try and fulfill anybody's expectation. You know what I mean? Only then do we have a better fulfilled and just more peace at heart. You know, you just want that, like, peaceful, like, not thinking that somebody's thinking bad, or somebody's mad, or somebody's not happy with you at that moment, because it's really distracting your own mind, you know, from things that you should actually be focusing on. But having that intentional way of life it changes how you interact with others, because you can then become more practical in how you also project your expectations.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
I'll end it there.
I agree. No, man, that's awesome. I agree.
Mm.
I agree. For me, again, it's all about that inner work. So, which is scary for people. You know, I've shared this before as well. I think people don't want to do that. It's scary. It's hard. It's difficult. But like we've already said, those things are the things that are most likely to help you to grow and
Mm.
move forward. So therefore, I had this conversation just before we jumped on, where I was talking to someone and they were like, "Well, people always want to run away from the bad, and if there's problems, like not solve them." And it's like I'm kind of like the other way. Like if there's a problem, I want to like solve it. Like boom. Like I'm in total problem solving kind of mode. Like if there's something bad, let's solve it. You know, problem solving. Like let's do it. You know, because otherwise the thing just escalates. You know, like so if there's a problem, like just solve it. But that's probably a different topic for a different day, like the whole problem solving kind of thing. But that's where my mindset is at. And so
Mm.
it's the same with the inner work. Like do it. Like you know, it's hard, it's difficult, it's challenging. Just do it. You know, it's the thing that's going to help you to grow. It's a journey. It's a process. Like you don't just wake up, you know, tomorrow morning and start it, and then by Sunday, you know, you've got it all figured out. You know, it's like I shared a post I think earlier this week where it's
Mm.
only now like 2020. Like I've been on this personal growth journey really for 3 years. Um, Entrepreneurship for just a bit longer, but it's only this year that I've really identified like that mission and like that North Star and like that purpose, etc. Before, like I wasn't aimlessly kind of lost in the forest type of thing. Like what am I
Mm.
doing? Like I had um, some direction because I knew I wanted to run my own business. So I had kind of these things like guided from that value system, that belief system, etc. But when you then like start that it's that quote. What's that quote? The journey of a 10,000 miles, whatever, begins with a single step, right? And so when you start to take that step, because you know roughly what direction you want to go in, for me, business, etc., entrepreneurship, run my own thing, you like you figure out the rest along the way, you know, and that's what I've been able to do in like my own self-discovery, my own inner work journey. And the point of me sharing this is that it takes time, and so people aren't just gonna figure this all out, you know, between now and the beginning of July or over the weekend or kind of, you know, all these different things. And so then it becomes a completely different conversation around patience in the long term, but speed in the short term. But maybe that's something we can talk about
Mm.
another day. Um, but basically, like the concept is having that long term patience, but on the day to day, taking action and doing stuff,
Mm.
trying different things and learning and growing, not just sitting around watching Netflix or watching the news and doing nothing. You know, so having that long term patience for something to happen or to, you know, if it's a business, like reach a certain goal or whatever, like long term patience, but in the short term, like right here, right now, like action, 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 you know, and moving with speed in that. So learning, growing, etc. But
Mm.
that's probably a different conversation. In terms of, I don't know if you have anything on that, and then I'm thinking if we dive into final thoughts.
No, no. I think you've said it all, man. You really have. Nah, you've said it all, bro.
Okay, awesome. Do you have any other words of inspiration or final final things?
I mean, having spoken about this, like expectations and intentions, um, I think it was coming from a point of I've just, for my own personal self, I think I've just recently come to a point where um I'm accepting my own intentions and not allowing people's expectations of me to doubt those intentions.
Makes sense.
Because one thing I found for my own self is that I'm very passionate, and I can allow people's feelings and thoughts and expectations to have me in an overthinking state, that I
Mm-hmm.
then overthink my own steps and whether I'm actually right or whether I'm actually just stepping on other people's toes. And in that would set me in a whole different course of thought
Yeah.
pattern of doubting, like, should I have done that? Maybe I could have done this differently. Maybe this would have happened like this. And by the time I want to do something, I've already spent so much chunk of time thinking about how to, you know, make peace with other people's
Mm-hmm.
expectations, that my own intentions they're in the back seat.
Mm.
So I think it's, from experience, it's a really liberating feeling. It's a really, um because now you're almost leading your life first, and then, you know, interacting with others. You're working on what it's like the seven principles of highly
Mm.
effective people. That whole circle on how we come from dependent state to interdependent, and then to independence, and then into an interdependent stage. Because you first do the things that you are dependent on.
Mm.
Okay, for example, waking up, doing your bed, doing certain things that are dependent on your actions, right? And that, when you look at it in terms of working within yourself, it's about getting up in the morning, taking care of that inner self first. Read something motivational, read something that gets you into a place where you're listening to yourself, you're listening to your own heart, your own spirit, before you are led by many expectations of the world as you go on with your day. And in that place of taking care of that dependent part of your being, you move into an independent state where you are independently aware of what you are good at. After that
Mm.
session of motivating yourself, reading something, getting your mind into a place where you need to be able to have that growth, you're now at a independent state. You
Mm.
know what you're good at, you know what you're going to do, you know what your plans are, you know what you're intending to do with your day. You'd have made plans, you'd have gotten yourself ready inside first, you
Yeah.
know
Super important.
and and just like that, when you move into the third state of interdependency, you're now working with the world. So it's like in that example I'm saying, you've moved from the dependent things of making your bed, listening to, just doing things in the house and doing inner work. And then independence is writing your plan of the day, knowing what you need to take care of, whatever it is, from your own. And interdependently, that's when you're stepping out the door. That's when
Mm.
you're now meeting the world. Now you're meeting expectations, people's expectations, you know. But now you've already had inner work that enables you now to judge whether those expectations are aligned with your own expectations of yourself and your intentions of that day, so that you are not, you know, taken aside and then completely miss your whole focus that you had in the morning. So it then becomes a whole cycle, you know what I mean? Because then now you're now dependent with the people, and then you're working. Yeah, it's fun, when you actually begin this journey, because you find so many things that you have to try, and you have to just do to in order to actually see for yourself, like, oh wait, that actually works, or actually that if I do it like this, because at the end of the day, it's a personal journey. No, do you know what I mean? Something that's gonna work for Luke is not gonna work for me. Something that's gonna work for me may not work for you, but it's like sharing and having that community sense of knowing that it's not you're not on your own. The journey, many people have been on it before as well. Many will do as well after us, but it's about sharing what we have found through the journey so that somebody may develop it into a better state, moving forward. So we should never be afraid of of accepting our intentions, as bold as they may be. Reaffirm to yourself that you are not dumb, you are not stupid to come up with an idea that you may have that may seem so far and unorthodox to the conventions of the world. But if that is your intention that you have come up with, you have grown to a point where you can, see that in your mind's eye and see the possibility of it, then don't let the expectations of the world make you feel small.
Yeah.
Don't let those obstacles become your way, man. If anything, let them motivate and actually encourage you to actually prove and actually show that it is possible.
100%, man. I
Yeah.
definitely echo that. Definitely echo that. So, Leroy, thank you so much for joining me today for this episode. I think we're pretty much there, a lot there for people to go through in that. Yeah, good episode.
It was good. It was good. I think people can always let us know if they want us to talk about anything. Do you know what I mean? We just talking about anything and everything that comes to our head, to be honest, right now. But we're enjoying it, and I don't mind. So thank you, Luke, man. Thank you, man, for another session.
No worries. I think next week we have our first guest, I believe.
Yes.
So that should be good.
That should be good. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Hope you guys can join us. It should be good.
Yeah, for sure. Justin, I think. So I will check that, guys. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Please do reach out to myself or Leroy if you have any topics you want us to cover. And we will be back next week, 2 p.m. So the earlier time of 2 p.m. Next Friday. And I think it's our first guest episode. So we're looking to that. Have a great week in the meantime, guys. Go out there and crush it.
All right.